You know how sometimes everything in your life feels perfectly balanced, and then in a single moment, it all starts to crumble? That's exactly where I was. My name is Eric, and for 7 years, I thought Rachel, my wife, and I had something unshakable. Turns out, I was wrong. It all started with this one party Rachel had mentioned casually during dinner one evening. "It's just a small gathering," she'd said, swirling her wine glass. "A few coworkers, some friends, nothing crazy." The way she said it didn't sit right with me. It wasn't just the words. It was the tone, the kind of tone that made me think she was testing the waters. "I don't think it's a good idea," I said, setting my fork down. "We've been off lately. Maybe staying in and spending time together would be better." She rolled her eyes. "Eric, it's just a party. I don't need permission to go." I wanted to push back, to say something that would stop her from going, but I didn't. Instead, I let the conversation die, and she didn't bring it up again until the night of the party. That Friday, she came home from work and barely said a word to me. She went straight upstairs, changed into this tight black dress I'd never seen before, and came down looking like she was ready for a red carpet event. "You're really going?" I asked, trying to keep my voice calm. "Yes," she said curtly, grabbing her purse. "Don't wait up." And with that, she was out the door. I sat in the living room for a long time after she left, my thoughts racing. Something about the whole situation felt off. Rachel wasn't usually like this. Sure, we had our disagreements, but she'd never been this dismissive before. I wanted to text her, to call her, and demand answers, but I stopped myself. Instead, I decided to do something I hadn't done in a long time. Absolutely nothing. I ignored her the rest of the night. I didn't check my phone, didn't pace around waiting for her to come home. I just sat there, watched some mindless TV, and went to bed. If she wanted to act like I didn't exist, I'd do the same. The next morning, I woke up to an empty bed. Rachel wasn't home. My stomach twisted as I checked my phone, expecting some sort of explanation, a text, a call, anything. But there was nothing. By noon, I was done waiting. I called her, and to my surprise, she actually picked up. "Where are you?" I asked, trying to keep my voice steady. "I stayed at a friend's place," she said, her tone casual, like it was the most normal thing in the world. "Why didn't you tell me?" She hesitated. "I didn't think you'd care, Eric. You made it pretty clear last night that you're fine without me." Her words stung, but there was something else in her voice, something that didn't feel right. "Which friend?" I asked, my chest tightening. "Why does it matter?" she snapped. "I'll be home soon." And with that, she hung up. When she finally walked through the door that afternoon, she was all smiles, acting like nothing had happened. "You're in a good mood," I said, my tone sharper than I intended. "Why wouldn't I be?" she replied, tossing her purse onto the couch. I wanted to push, to demand answers, but something in me told me to wait. If she was hiding something, I needed to be smart about this. I needed to know the truth. That's when I decided to check her phone. She left it charging on the kitchen counter while she went upstairs to shower. My hands were shaking as I picked it up, half hoping I wouldn't find anything, half expecting my worst fears to be confirmed. It didn't take long to find the messages. The texts weren't from a coworker or some mutual friend. They were from a guy named Alex, a name I'd never heard her mention before. "Last night was amazing. Can't stop thinking about you. I wish we didn't have to sneak around." My stomach dropped as I scrolled through the conversation. There were pictures, 2 selfies of the two of them at the party, laughing, her hand on his chest. I put the phone down, my hands trembling. My mind raced with 100 questions, but one thing was clear. My wife wasn't just at a party last night. She was with him. After reading those messages, I felt like the ground had been ripped out from under me. My chest tightened, my hands wouldn't stop shaking, and the air in the room felt thick, like I couldn't breathe. But I couldn't confront Rachel, not yet. If I wanted answers, if I wanted the full truth, I had to be smart. I placed her phone back on the counter exactly how I found it, then sat on the couch, trying to calm my racing thoughts. When she came downstairs, towel drying her hair, she didn't seem the least bit suspicious. "Everything okay?" she asked casually, glancing at me. I forced a neutral expression. "Yeah, just thinking about some work stuff." She nodded, grabbed her phone, and went to the bedroom. If she had any idea I'd seen the messages, she didn't show it. That night, as she scrolled through her phone in bed, I kept replaying the messages in my head. "Last night was amazing. Can't stop thinking about you. Who was Alex? How long had this been going on? And why did she feel so comfortable lying to me?" My thoughts kept me awake long after Rachel had fallen asleep. I knew I had to do something, but what? The next morning, while Rachel was in the shower, I decided to start digging. If Alex was someone from work, I'd find something, a name, an email, anything. I went to her laptop, opened her work email, and started searching. Sure enough, there he was, Alex Hunter, a coworker from another branch based out of Chicago. Their emails were professional at first, but as I scrolled further back, the tone shifted. Can't wait to see you again. And that conference was the highlight of my year. You're even more amazing in person than I imagined. My chest tightened. So, it started at a work conference. When Rachel came out of the shower, I was back in the kitchen, pretending to make breakfast. What's your day look like? I asked, keeping my tone light. Oh, nothing crazy, she replied. Just running errands, maybe meeting a friend for coffee. A friend? I asked, my stomach nodding. Anyone I know? She hesitated for just a moment too long. No, just someone from the gym. Her lie hung in the air like a bad smell. That afternoon, I decided to follow her. It wasn't something I was proud of, but I needed to know. She left the house around 2 p.m., wearing that same black dress she'd worn to the party. I waited a few minutes before getting in my car and following at a safe distance. She pulled into a small cafe downtown, parked, and walked inside. I stayed in my car, heart pounding, watching as she took a seat at a table near the window. A few minutes later, a man walked in, tall, dark-haired, confident, the kind of guy who oozes charisma. He walked straight to Rachel's table, leaned down to kiss her cheek, and sat across from her. It was Alex. I felt a surge of anger, my fist gripping the steering wheel so tightly my knuckles turned white. Part of me wanted to storm in there, to confront them right then and there, but I knew better. If I lost my temper, I'd lose any leverage I had. Instead, I grabbed my phone and snapped a few photos. Rachel laughing with Alex. Alex reaching across the table to touch her hand. Rachel leaning in close. Her expression soft and affectionate. An expression she hadn't worn for me in months. I sat there for nearly an hour, watching as they talked, laughed, and sipped their coffee like nothing in the world was wrong. When they finally left, I followed them at a distance, my stomach churning. They didn't go far, just to a nearby park. They walked together, holding hands, looking every bit like a couple in love. By the time I got home, my head was spinning. I had the proof I needed, but I still didn't know how to confront Rachel. Should I wait, gather more evidence? Or should I show her the photos and demand answers? That night, I barely spoke to her. She didn't seem to notice, or maybe she didn't care. When she finally went to bed, I sat alone in the living room, staring at the photos on my phone. This wasn't just a hunch anymore. This wasn't paranoia. My wife was cheating on me, and now I had to figure out what to do about it. The next morning, Rachel acted like nothing had changed. She made small talk during breakfast, scrolling through her phone like she didn't have a care in the world. I watched her carefully, biting back the urge to confront her then and there. Instead, I kept playing the role of the clueless husband, all the while formulating a plan. I needed to get inside her head, to make her question whether I knew anything at all. That afternoon, I decided to test the waters. So, I said casually, as we cleaned up after lunch, "How was coffee with your gym friend yesterday?" Rachel froze for the briefest moment, her hand pausing midair as she reached for a plate. Then, just as quickly, she recovered. "It was fine," she said, not meeting my eyes. "We just caught up, nothing special." I nodded, pretending to accept her answer, but inside, my suspicions grew. She was lying, and she knew I knew it. Over the next few days, I started dropping subtle hints, little comments designed to make her squirm. "You've been spending a lot of time out lately," I said one evening as she came home late from work. She laughed nervously. "It's just been busy, that's all." Or, as she scrolled through her phone on the couch, I'd glance over and ask, "Who's texting you so much these days?" She'd quickly lock her screen, forcing a smile. "Just work stuff." The more I pressed, the more I could see the cracks forming. Rachel was getting sloppy, and I knew it was only a matter of time before she slipped up. A few days later, I got my chance. Rachel left her phone on the kitchen counter while she went upstairs to grab something. This time, I wasn't looking for texts. I already knew about Alex. I wanted to see if there was anything else. I opened her photo gallery, scrolling past pictures of our kids, family vacations, and random snapshots. And then I found it. A folder labeled work stuff. Inside were pictures of her and Alex taken at various places, a hotel room, a beach, even what looked like his apartment. In one photo, they were standing in front of a mirror, his arms wrapped around her waist as she smiled into the camera. I sent the pictures to myself, my hands shaking with a mix of rage and heartbreak. That evening, I decided to confront her carefully. We were sitting in the living room, the TV playing in the background. Rachel was scrolling through her phone as usual when I said, "I've been thinking about us lately." She looked up, surprised. "Oh, what about?" "I feel like we've been distant," I said, keeping my tone calm. "Like there's this wall between us. Do you feel that too?" She hesitated, her expression unreadable. "I guess, maybe a little. But things have just been stressful. Work, the kids, life. It's a lot." I nodded, pretending to agree. "Yeah, I get that. But I think we need to be honest with each other, Rachel. About everything." Her eyes darted away, and I saw the panic flash across her face. "What do you mean?" I leaned forward, my voice steady. "I mean that if there's something going on, something you need to tell me, I think now would be the time." She opened her mouth, then closed it again, clearly grappling with what to say. "There's nothing," she said finally, her voice barely above a whisper. I stared at her for a long moment, my heart pounding. "Okay," I said, leaning back. "If you say so." The next morning, I put my plan into motion. I printed out one of the photos of her and Alex, the one in front of the mirror, and placed it in an envelope. Then I slipped the envelope into her purse before she left for work. The entire day, I waited for her call, my stomach in knots. When she finally called, her voice was shaky. "Eric, we need to talk." "Do we?" I said calmly. "What about?" "You know what about," she snapped. "Where did you get that picture?" "I think the better question is why that picture exists in the first place," I replied. She was silent for a long moment before whispering, "I'm sorry." I hung up the phone. When she came home that evening, her usual confidence was gone. She looked small, defeated, her eyes red and puffy from crying. "I don't even know where to start," she said, standing in the doorway. I crossed my arms, keeping my expression cold. "Try the beginning." She sat down on the couch, her hands trembling. "It started at a work conference," she admitted. "I didn't plan for it to happen, but it did, and I didn't know how to stop." "Didn't know how to stop?" I repeated, my voice rising. "You mean you didn't want to stop?" She flinched, but didn't argue. "I've been a fool, Rachel," I continued. "I trusted you. I built a life with you. And this is how you repay me?" She started crying, but I didn't feel any sympathy, not this time. "I'm sorry," she said through her tears. "I don't expect you to forgive me, but I need you to know that I regret it. I regret all of it." I didn't respond. Instead, I stood up, walked to the door, and opened it. "You can stay at your friend's place tonight. I need time to think." She hesitated, looking like she wanted to argue, but then she grabbed her purse and walked out. As the door closed behind her, I felt a strange mix of relief and sadness. This wasn't the end, not yet, but it was the beginning of the end, and I knew there was no turning back. Rachel didn't come back the next day, or the day after that. She texted me once to say she was staying at a friend's house and would give me the space I needed. The silence in the house felt deafening, but I welcomed it. For the first time in weeks, I could think clearly. I spent those days focusing on Emily and Jake. They didn't know what was happening yet, and I wasn't ready to tell them. All they knew was that Mommy was staying with a friend for a little while. I hated lying to them, but I couldn't bring myself to shatter their image of her, not yet. On the third day, Rachel called. "Eric, can we talk?" she asked, her voice soft. "Please. I know you're angry, but I need to explain." I considered saying no, but something in her tone made me agree. "Come by tonight after the kids go to bed," I said. That evening, Rachel walked into the house looking like a shadow of the confident woman she used to be. Her hair was pulled back in a messy bun, and her eyes were red, like she'd been crying for days. "Thank you for agreeing to see me," she said, sitting down across from me at the dining table. "Start talking," I said, my voice cold. She took a deep breath, her hands trembling. "I don't know how to even begin. I know I've destroyed everything. I know I've hurt you and the kids in ways I can never undo. But I want to try to fix this. I want to fix us." I scoffed, leaning back in my chair. "Fix us? You think this can be fixed?" "I don't know," she admitted, her voice breaking, "but I need to try. I love you, Eric. I never stopped loving you. What I did with Alex, it was a mistake, a horrible, unforgivable mistake. But it wasn't because I stopped loving you." I stared at her, my chest tightening with anger. You call 6 months of lying and sneaking around a mistake, Rachel? A mistake is forgetting to pick up milk at the store. What you did was a choice. A series of choices. She flinched, tears streaming down her face. You're right. It was a choice, and it was the worst choice I've ever made. For the next hour, she poured everything out. How her affair with Alex started at a work conference. How it spiraled into something she couldn't control, and how she convinced herself that it didn't mean anything. I thought I could keep it separate from us, she said. I thought it wouldn't affect our family. But I was wrong. I see that now. Her words rang hollow. She sounded sorry, but sorry didn't erase the betrayal, the lies, or the pain she had caused. I don't know if I can ever trust you again, I said finally, my voice low. You didn't just cheat on me, Rachel. You cheated on our family, on the life we built together. And I don't know if there's any coming back from that. She nodded, her tears falling onto the table. I'll do whatever it takes. Eric, whatever you need me to do. Just please, don't give up on us. After she left that night, I sat alone in the quiet house, staring at the wedding photo on the mantel. The couple in that picture seemed like strangers now. I didn't know who Rachel was anymore, and I wasn't sure I wanted to find out. But one thing was clear. I couldn't keep living in limbo. The next day, I called my lawyer. I want to start the process, I said. He didn't ask for details. He just nodded and said, I'll take care of everything. When Rachel found out, she begged me to reconsider. She promised to go to counseling, to cut off all contact with Alex, to do whatever it took to rebuild our marriage. But it was too late. Rachel, I said calmly, this isn't just about what you did. It's about the fact that I can't look at you without remembering the lies, the betrayal, and the nights you chose him over us. I deserve better. The kids deserve better. Her tears didn't sway me. I had made my decision, and for the first time in months, I felt a sense of peace. As the weeks went on, Rachel moved into her own apartment. We worked out a custody arrangement for Emily and Jake, and though it wasn't easy, we made it work. I stayed civil for the sake of the kids, but my relationship with Rachel was over. I wasn't sure what the future held, but I knew one thing for certain. I wouldn't let her betrayal define me. The weeks that followed were some of the hardest I'd ever faced. Telling Emily and Jake about the divorce was heart-wrenching. They didn't understand why it was happening, and I struggled to explain it in a way that wouldn't taint their view of Rachel. Mom and I still love you both very much, I said, sitting with them at the dining table. We're just going to be living in different homes from now on. Emily, ever the sensitive one, burst into tears. But why, Daddy? Why can't we all stay together? I swallowed the lump in my throat. Sometimes grown-ups need to make hard decisions, but this doesn't change how much we love you. You'll always have both of us. Jake stayed quiet, staring down at the table, his little fists clenched. He didn't cry, but I could see the confusion and hurt in his eyes. It broke my heart, but I knew this was the right thing to do. Staying together for the kids, while living in a broken marriage would have done more harm than good. Rachel moved into her new apartment a week later. The first weekend the kids stayed with her, the house felt unbearably quiet. I spent the evening pacing the living room, checking my phone every 5 minutes in case they called. They didn't. When they came back on Sunday evening, Emily ran up to me and hugged me tightly. We missed you, Daddy. Jake, always trying to act tougher than he was, nodded and said, Mom's place is okay, but it's not the same. Hearing that was bittersweet. I wanted them to feel safe and happy wherever they were, but a part of me couldn't help but feel relieved that they still thought of our house as home. In the weeks that followed, I threw myself into rebuilding a sense of normalcy. I focused on work, took the kids out for weekend adventures, and even started hitting the gym again, a habit I hadn't kept up with in years. One Saturday morning, as I was making pancakes, Emily looked up from the table and said, Daddy, you seem happier now. Her words caught me off guard. What do you mean? You smile more, she said simply. I glanced at Jake, who was nodding in agreement. Yeah, he added, you don't look so sad all the time. Their observations hit me harder than I expected. Had I really been that distant before? I guess I am happier, I admitted, ruffling Jake's hair. It's because I have you too. They grinned, and for the first time in a long time, I felt like I was doing something right. Rachel, to her credit, was trying. She attended every soccer game, every school event, and made an effort to show up for the kids. We communicated only when necessary, mostly about schedules and the kids' needs, but our conversations were civil. One evening, after I dropped the kids off at her apartment, She hesitated before closing the door. Eric, she said softly, thank you. For what? I asked, genuinely confused. For not turning the kids against me, she replied, her voice shaky. I know I don't deserve it, but it means a lot. I didn't respond right away. Part of me wanted to tell her that I wasn't doing it for her. I was doing it for Emily and Jake. But instead, I just nodded. They deserve the best from both of us, I said. She gave me a small, sad smile and closed the door. As the weeks turned into months, I found myself thinking less and less about Rachel's betrayal. The anger that had consumed me was slowly replaced by something else: acceptance. What she did was unforgivable, but holding on to the pain wasn't helping me or the kids. One evening, I received a text from Mark, an old college friend I hadn't spoken to in years. Hey man, heard about what you've been going through. Let's grab a drink soon. I hesitated for a moment before replying. Sounds good. Let me know when. It was a small step, but it felt like the beginning of something new. The next weekend, after dropping the kids off at Rachel's, I decided to take a walk through the park near our old house. It was a place we used to go as a family, and being there alone felt strange at first. But as I walked along the familiar paths, I felt a sense of peace. Life wasn't perfect, but it was moving forward, and for the first time in a long time, I felt ready to move with it. Life slowly found its rhythm again. Between work, taking care of Emily and Jake, and rebuilding my own sense of stability, the days became less about surviving and more about living. Still, there were moments when the weight of everything that had happened would creep back in. Quiet evenings when the kids were with Rachel, or when I passed by places that held memories of our life together. But one thing I had learned through all of this was that pain doesn't last forever, as long as you don't let it. It was on one of those quiet evenings, while the kids were with Rachel, that Mark and I finally met for that drink. He picked a small bar downtown, the kind of place that was just loud enough to drown out awkward silences, but not so loud that you couldn't have a real conversation. Mark greeted me with a firm handshake and a grin. Man, it's good to see you. You look better than I expected. I laughed, shaking my head. Thanks, I think. We grabbed a couple of beers and settled into a corner booth. It didn't take long before the conversation turned serious. So, Mark said, leaning back in his seat, Rachel, what the hell happened? I gave him the short version, enough to explain the situation without diving into the painful details. That's rough, he said, shaking his head. But honestly, you seem like you're handling it better than most people would. I shrugged. What choice do I have? I've got 2 kids who need me to keep it together. Falling apart isn't an option. Mark nodded, his expression thoughtful. Still, you're allowed to think about yourself too. When's the last time you did something just for you? I hesitated. The truth was, I couldn't remember. My life had revolved around the kids, work, and dealing with the fallout of the divorce. Exactly, Mark said, reading my expression. You deserve a life outside of all this, Eric. Don't forget that. The conversation stuck with me long after I got home that night. For so long, I had been focused on getting through each day that I hadn't stopped to think about what I wanted out of life. The next day, I decided to make a change. I signed up for a gym membership, something I hadn't done since before the kids were born. At first, it felt strange, walking into a place filled with people who seemed so put together while I still felt like I was figuring things out. But as the weeks went on, it became something I looked forward to. It was at the gym that I met someone unexpected. Her name was Sarah, and we kept running into each other during the same evening sessions. She wasn't flashy or over the top, just kind, approachable, and quick to smile. One evening, after weeks of casual nods and polite small talk, she struck up a real conversation. You're here almost as often as I am, she said with a grin. What's your secret motivation? I chuckled, wiping the sweat from my forehead. Trying to rebuild my life, I guess. Her expression softened. That's a good reason. I'm Sarah, by the way. Eric, I replied, shaking her hand. We ended up talking for nearly half an hour, well past the end of my workout. She didn't pry into my personal life, and I didn't offer too much, but there was an ease to the conversation that I hadn't felt in a long time. Over the next few weeks, Sarah and I started talking more. We'd exchange tips about workouts, share funny stories, and occasionally grab a smoothie at the cafe next door. It wasn't anything serious, just 2 people finding comfort in each other's company. But it felt good. One evening, as I was tucking Emily into bed, she looked up at me and said, Daddy, you're smiling more now. I like it. Her words hit me harder than I expected. For so long, I had been consumed by anger, pain, and regret, but she was right. I was smiling more. Life was starting to feel lighter. Rachel noticed the change too. During one of our custody exchanges, she hesitated before getting back into her car. "You seem different," she said, her voice cautious. "I'm trying to move forward," I replied simply. She nodded, her expression unreadable. "I'm glad. You deserve to be happy, Eric." For once, her words didn't sting. They felt genuine, and for the first time, I didn't feel the need to analyze or second-guess them. Life wasn't perfect, but it was moving forward, and for the first time in what felt like forever, I was too. The weeks turned into months, and slowly, I found myself embracing this new chapter of my life. Co-parenting with Rachel wasn't always easy, but we'd fallen into a rhythm. For the sake of Emily and Jake, we kept things civil, even friendly at times. The tension that once hung between us had started to fade, replaced by a quiet understanding. Understanding that our marriage was over, but our roles as parents were forever. Sarah and I continued to talk, and eventually, our casual conversations turned into something more. One evening, after a particularly good workout, she suggested grabbing dinner instead of our usual smoothies. "I feel like I've heard your entire gym routine," she teased, "but I don't know much about you outside of here. Let's change that." For a moment, I hesitated. It had been years since I'd gone on a date, if you could even call this a date, and part of me wasn't sure I was ready. But there was something about Sarah's easy smile and genuine warmth that made me say yes. We met at a small Italian restaurant that night, the kind of cozy, unpretentious place where the food speaks for itself. Over pasta and wine, we talked about everything: our families, our jobs, our dreams. She told me about her work as a graphic designer, her love for hiking, and how she'd been through her own share of heartbreak. I shared a bit about my kids, careful not to dive too deeply into the messy details of my past. "I like how much you care about them," she said, her voice soft. "It's rare to see someone so dedicated to their kids." Her words caught me off guard, but I smiled. They're my world. Everything I do is for them. As the evening went on, I realized how easy it was to talk to her. There were no awkward pauses, no pressure to impress. It was just comfortable. After that night, Sarah and I started seeing each other more often. It wasn't anything serious. We both made that clear from the start. But it was nice to have someone to share a meal with, to laugh with, to feel normal around. For the first time since my marriage ended, I felt a flicker of hope that life could be more than just managing the aftermath of betrayal. Meanwhile, Rachel had started to rebuild her own life. She began attending therapy and even joined a support group for women who had made mistakes in their relationships. One evening, during a custody exchange, she surprised me with an unexpected apology. "I know I've said this before," she began, her voice steady, "but I want to say it again. I'm sorry, Eric. For everything. For the lies, the pain, the mess I made of our family. I know I can't change the past, but I hope someday you'll be able to forgive me." Her words were sincere, but I wasn't sure how to respond. Forgiveness wasn't something that came easily to me, especially after everything we'd been through. "I appreciate that," I said finally, "and I hope you're finding your own way forward." She nodded, her expression a mix of relief and sadness. "I am. I just wanted you to know that I'll always regret what I did to you and to us." Over time, the kids began to adjust to their new normal. Emily's grades improved, and Jake became more confident in soccer. They seemed happier, more settled, and that was all I could have asked for. One evening, as we sat around the dinner table, Emily looked up at me and said, "Daddy, are you happy now?" Her question caught me off guard, but I nodded. "I think I'm getting there, sweetheart. How about you?" She grinned. "I think we're all happier now." Later that night, as I tucked the kids into bed, I realized she was right. Life wasn't perfect, but it was better. The pain of the past was still there, but it no longer defined me. I was moving forward, one step at a time, and for the first time in a long time, I felt like I was exactly where I was supposed to be. It's funny how life works. 1 year ago, I couldn't imagine a future where I wasn't weighed down by Rachel's betrayal, where every day didn't feel like a battle just to keep my head above water. But here I was, sitting at the park with Emily and Jake on a sunny Saturday afternoon, watching them chase each other around the playground, their laughter filling the air. Rachel and I had found a rhythm, not as husband and wife, but as co-parents. The bitterness that once defined our interactions had softened. We weren't friends, and we likely never would be, but we had reached a place where we could talk without tension, make decisions together for the kids, and even share a laugh once in a while. Sarah had also become a quiet but meaningful presence in my life. We weren't rushing anything, but the time we spent together felt natural and easy. She understood my priorities. Emily and Jake always came first, and she respected the boundaries I had set for myself. One evening after dinner at her place, she asked me a question I hadn't expected. "Do you think you'll ever fully forgive her?" I paused, setting my glass of wine down. "Rachel?" She nodded. "For everything. For the pain, the lies, the betrayal." I thought about it for a moment before answering. I don't know if I'll ever fully forgive her. What she did changed everything. It broke something in me that I don't think can ever be fully fixed. But I also know that holding on to anger doesn't help anyone. I've let go of a lot of the bitterness, for the kids' sake and for mine. Maybe that's as close to forgiveness as I'll get. She smiled, reaching for my hand. That's more than most people would be willing to do. Over time, Sarah met Emily and Jake. It wasn't a big, dramatic moment, just a casual introduction during a trip to the park. To my relief, the kids liked her immediately. Emily asked if Sarah could join us for ice cream, and Jake spent the afternoon trying to impress her with his soccer skills. Watching them interact filled me with a sense of hope I hadn't felt in years. Maybe, just maybe, there was room in our lives for something new. Rachel noticed the change too. One evening during a school event, she pulled me aside. "You seem happy," she said, her tone cautious. "I am," I replied simply. She hesitated before adding, "I'm glad. You deserve to be happy, Eric." For once, her words didn't feel hollow. They felt genuine, and I nodded in response. "We both do, Rachel." As the months passed, life settled into a new normal. Emily and Jake continued to thrive, their smiles and laughter a constant reminder of what truly mattered. Sarah and I grew closer, though we both took things slowly, careful not to rush into anything that might disrupt the balance we had found. And Rachel, she continued to work on herself. She apologized again, not just to me, but to the kids, promising to be the best mother she could be. I wasn't sure if she'd ever fully forgive herself, but I could see she was trying. One quiet evening, as I sat on the porch watching the sunset, Emily came outside and climbed into my lap. "Daddy," she said, her voice soft. "Are you happy now?" I wrapped my arms around her, kissing the top of her head. "Yeah, sweetheart, I think I am." She smiled, leaning against me as we watched the sun dip below the horizon. And in that moment, I realized I wasn't just surviving anymore. I was living. The past would always be a part of me, but it didn't define me. The pain, the betrayal, the heartbreak, they were all chapters in my story, but they weren't the whole book. This was my life now, and for the first time in a long time, it felt like mine.